Last week, Canada's mass immigration train wreck was forced into the mainstream media spotlight after a United Nations report into the temporary foreign worker system in Canada was released, calling the system a breeding ground for contemporary slavery. Well, that had to have been quite a shock to all the mainstream media journalists who turned a blind eye to the expansion of the temporary foreign worker program over the past few years. Canada has relied on small numbers of temporary foreign workers in the agricultural sector for quite some time. But thanks to an interactive map that any Canadian can use online, we can see that the use of temporary foreign workers to flip burgers and pour coffee at fast food restaurants has skyrocketed. No wonder youth unemployment is so high across the country. Now, the blame for this should be going around evenly. It's the federal government who greenlight the use of temporary foreign workers in the fast food sector. But it's also employers who benefit from being able to rely on temporary foreign workers and to suppress wages. And as if this story just couldn't get any better, it turns out that British Columbia Liberal MP Sukh Dhaliwal actually hired temporary foreign workers in late 2023 for his own private business. When even the United Nations is calling this system modern slavery in our country, you know there's a big problem. And it's also way worse than what we're being told. Before we get into the show, be sure to drop a like on this video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: would you boycott a business that relies exclusively on temporary foreign workers as staff? Let me know your answer in the comments below, and let's get into it. Since the beginning of 2023, the federal government greenlit the hiring of close to 300,000 temporary foreign workers, 294,000 to be exact, and according to the United Nations, the system isn't going so well. This was how the state broadcaster reported the news that Canada is actually operating a modern slavery system.
Canada's temporary foreign worker programs are the subject of a scathing report from the United Nations. The UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery says the programs for foreign agricultural workers are, quote, a breeding ground for modern forms of slavery. Tomoya Obokata says he heard accounts of exploitation and abuse from migrant workers during a 2-week fact-finding mission to Canada. And his report comes about a year after Jamaican farm workers in Ontario called attention to their own alleged mistreatment.
It wouldn't surprise me if the federal government knew that a report like this was inevitable. After all, it was Mark Miller, the immigration minister, and Justin Trudeau several months ago who called out employers for relying on temporary foreign workers and for driving down Canadian wages. Suppressing Canadian wages and taking jobs away from young Canadians in the job market, that's pretty bad. But modern slavery? Well, that requires some serious damage control. This was how Mark Miller last week addressed these rather serious allegations.
I object to the characterization. I think to some extent it's quite offensive to treat people that have employees that are temporary foreign workers as slave owners. I have met a number of them. I've been to farms. The rapporteur in this first meeting, my understanding, actually never went to a farm. It's something that I don't want to deny the underlying facts. There are abuses. I think the characterization is inflammatory.
Every single time a temporary foreign worker is hired, it has to go through the federal government. It has to be approved by the federal government. So it's all very strange when they pretend to be shocked about how fast this system has spiraled out of control. Now, I don't really believe the UN has any right to come into Canada and lecture us on how to run our country, but this report does make some shocking claims. Well, the United Nations Special Rapporteur assigned to investigate Canada's temporary foreign worker system, Tomoya Obokata, called the temporary foreign worker system a breeding ground for contemporary slavery. In the report, Obokata says that he received reports from workers being underpaid and going without protective equipment, and of employers confiscating documents, arbitrarily cutting working hours, and preventing workers from seeking health care. Women reported sexual harassment, exploitation, and abuse. In addition, police have reportedly failed to take complaints seriously, claim that they do not have jurisdiction and report workers to immigration authorities rather than investigating their complaints. As Obokata writes in his report, the government defers a significant portion of responsibility for informing temporary foreign workers of their rights to employers, despite the obvious conflict of interest. Unlike other newcomers, temporary foreign workers cannot benefit from federal settlement services, which would provide information on their rights and facilitate their ability to participate in public life. Because temporary foreign workers are tied to closed work permits, meaning they can't work for anyone else than the employer who brought them into their country for the period of time that they're allowed to stay, the report argues that this is a de facto debt bondage. But despite whatever concerns activist groups and the UN might have about this system, the federal government seems to love it. So you can get a better sense of just how frequently the federal government issues an LMIA to an employer. This is the quarterly breakdown of LMIAs issued across the country. And by the way, an LMIA is basically, it is an agreement between the employer and the federal government that employer has tried and failed to hire a Canadian or a permanent resident for a job and must therefore rely on a temporary foreign worker. In the first quarter of 2023, the federal government issued just under 60,000 LMIAs, 59,500. The following quarter, that number went down to 41,000. Following that, the third quarter of 2023, the number jumped back up to 47,000. And then, in the final quarter of 2023, those numbers just completely took off. 78,630 LMIAs issued in the fourth quarter of 2023. And in the first quarter of 2024, the federal government issued 68,000 LMIAs. Now, between 2018 and 2023, the number of temporary foreign workers working in agriculture, working as basically farmhands, went from 49,000 in 2018 to well over 80,000 in 2023, a 67% increase. But the most outrageous number out of all of this is the number of temporary foreign workers hired to work in fast food restaurants, to work as food service counter attendants. In 2018, there were only 170 temporary foreign workers hired to work as food counter attendants. By 2023, that number was 8.3 thousand, representing a 4,802% change. The number of temporary foreign workers hired as administrative assistants went from 287 to 3.3 thousand. From 2018 to 2023, there were now 3.3 thousand administrative assistants who are temporary foreign workers. And get this, there were only 16 temporary foreign workers hired to be nurses in 2018. 16. By 2023, the number of temporary foreign workers hired as nurses in Canada was over 2,500, representing a 15,613% change. Why can't Canadians do those jobs? Why can't we find Canadians to work as nurses? Why can't we find Canadians to work in fast food restaurants? And thanks to a very patriotic Canadian who took Employment and Social Services Canada data and put it onto an interactive map, we can now figure out which businesses rely the most on temporary foreign workers, which fast food restaurants rely on temporary foreign workers, and who are the biggest abusers of the temporary foreign worker program. Well, if you go to lmiamap.ca, you can find your town, your city, and figure out which businesses in your area are using temporary foreign workers, when in reality they should probably be hiring Canadians with better wages. But we have the map in front of us, and I've gone through the largest recipients of LMIAs in each province, and I want to just highlight a couple of them for you so you get a better idea. In the first quarter of 2024, the first 3 months of 2024, a business called S. Sunder Orchards in British Columbia received 427 temporary foreign workers. In Alberta, a farm business by the name of Big Marble Farms Inc., well, they received 273 temporary foreign workers to work at their farm. In the Greater Toronto Area, Algoma Orchards received 167 temporary foreign workers in the first quarter of 2024. But as you saw from that data we pulled earlier, fast food businesses are hiring temporary foreign workers at an outrageous rate. There are a couple of businesses that I want to highlight for you on the show so you get a better sense of just how widespread this problem is. For example, there's a company called Redberry Crown Restaurants. Redberry operates what appears to be hundreds of Burger King and Taco Bell locations. Now, in the first 3 months of 2024, the federal government approved 122 LMIAs, 122 temporary foreign workers, to work for Redberry Crown restaurants, to work as food service supervisors and managers at Taco Bell and Burger King restaurants. And I also just want to highlight this for you here. We're going to pick on one Tim Hortons location in Collingwood, Ontario. According to the LMIA map, this one Tim Hortons in Collingwood has 18 temporary foreign workers. One temporary foreign worker manager of the Tim Hortons, 8 food service supervisors, and 9 food counter attendants. 18 staff at one Tim Hortons location, that's quite a large number. You would almost have to think that that's the entire staff. Remarkable. There are those in the Liberal government who seem to want to get in on the action of the temporary foreign worker system in Canada. After all, with so many businesses enjoying the opportunities of hiring low-wage, out-of-country workers, it wouldn't be a shock to find Liberal MPs doing the same for their own private businesses. Such is the case with Liberal MP Sukh Dhaliwal out of Surrey, British Columbia. Turns out that actually Sukh Dhaliwal's land surveying company took advantage of the LMIA program by hiring legal administrative assistants. So with all these fast food jobs and even administrative jobs going to temporary foreign workers, what are young Canadians expected to do when they want to get a job, when they want to get a summer job or break into the job market? Well, they're actually just being left behind. Youth unemployment in Canada has increased by 40%. In April 2022, youth unemployment was at 10.2%. That number is now at 14%. It would not be a stretch at all to say that the federal government has abandoned the youth of this country in order to benefit employers by providing them with an endless supply of cheap foreign labor. Let's just call it what it is: betrayal. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.